At 11:23 p.m. on a Tuesday, my phone woke me with a light I recognized like a blade. The notification preview said only what it needed to say. You are out of the family. Do not come to gatherings. No calls, no explanations. It landed in my hands like a verdict. It felt like being removed from a photograph I had helped frame for years. Quiet, surgical, a small sentence that became an exile. I did not scream. I did not beg. I stood up, the floor cold under my bare feet, the room smelling faintly of the coffee I had forgotten to finish, and I opened my laptop. I did not cry. I opened a new spreadsheet and titled the first sheet, Evidence. Date, amount, reason, proof, I typed. The first sensation after that sharp spark of humiliation was not fury. It was a cold, methodical clarity. I had spent so long calling those withdrawals love or help that I had stopped tracking them as numbers. That night, the numbers spoke. Every transfer was a line, every line a weight, every weight an explanation. Before I go on, tell me where you are listening from, because I need to know I am not the only one who ever had to turn off the lights to see what was true. This is not revenge, it is accounting. In the days that followed the message, I moved like someone converting a language they had always thought was poetry into ledger entries. My mother, Linda, had a way of seasoning conversations with guilt until people ate what she wanted. My sister Claire was the golden child who collected smiles like trophies. My father, Robert, never asked questions that lasted long enough to be uncomfortable. My cousin Miguel texted sympathy and then moved on. My friend Marcus offered to look at bank statements. My neighbor Samir left boxes of pizza as if proximity could patch the broken rules of our house. My accountant Jenna helped me pull archived receipts. My lawyer, Alex Rivera, sat across from me and said a word I had not allowed myself to say out loud in years: restitution. I will name them because they became part of the scaffolding that held the truth when it came into view. I learned to stop saying I was helping and start saying I was paying. I called up old auto payments, screenshotted transfers with trembling fingers, scanned receipts that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and old coffee. The texture of each paper, the small curl at the edge, became evidence. I felt the weight of years settle on the table like dust. There was a signature I did not recognize, and a withdrawal labeled as a loan that I had never authorized. The smell of the printer ink mixed with the salt in my eyes, and I realized apologizing had been a currency I had been forced to spend. When I finally sat down with Alex, the conversation stretched. Like a scene in slow motion, and then snapped into a rapid exchange that made everything more real. "Read these to me," I said, shoving the folder across. I have dates, transfers, recurring payments on my card, a signature that is not mine, and invoices in my name. Alex looked up, tapped the folder, his tie a clinical stripe of navy. "We can send a formal notice, a demand for accounting, and if necessary, we can file for freezing of assets pending a civil claim." "Will that make them angry?" I asked. "Probably," he said. "Will it make them notice?" I asked. "It will make them accountable," he said. That exchange started a chain of action that moved me from a shocked child of family obligations to someone who could name the harm in public terms. I faxed copies to the bank, I requested certified statements, I ordered a certificate of signatures to be compared. My hands were steadier at noon than they had been at midnight. I learned to describe my life in rows and columns, and in doing so, I learned to stop thinking of generosity as something that erased debt. If this part resonates with you, please pause and read this carefully, because stories help and your voice matters. If this touched something in you, there is a memory there, and it is not shameful. Share in the comments the first time you noticed you were sustaining someone emotionally or financially, and begin your reply with, "My first time was," so others can find echoes. Describe one detail, the way you remember it, a time, a place, a sound. Your small note can help someone else notice patterns they have been normalizing. Tell whether you kept quiet for years or whether you asked for receipts right away. If you felt alone reading this, you are not the only one, and your comment can remind someone they are not invisible. People here will read and will offer practical tips or just an "I see you." Your words become data, and data helps people take steps. After you leave that comment, keep following, because later in this story, I will walk through how Alex and Jenna advised me to write the notification and what exact documents to include when you need to freeze accounts or request an inventory. Now, let us continue with what I found when I turned the private ledger into a public record. Collecting evidence became ritual. I found transfers labeled as gifts that matched the dates of mortgage payments on their house. I found receipts for repairs to cars registered under my name but serviced at a shop I never visited. I found a certificate from a clinic that listed a payment I had made and a signature that I had never given. One evening, Claire called, and the phone felt rough in my hand. She said quietly, "You always say you will help, so help." I replied, "When I help, I want a receipt." She laughed in a way that tried to make it a joke. "You always turn things into ledgers." I answered, "Because the ledger will prove what memory hides." We argued without shouting, and the quieter words were worse. She said, "You are making it messy." I said, "I am making it correct." Marcus texted offers to mediate. Miguel sent a long message full of family history and guilt, and then a shorter one asking me to forgive. I saved every message, every like, every selfie posted without me at family dinners. I screenshot timestamps, the way the light fell on their faces, the captions with heart emojis. I noticed how smell and texture lingered on the pages I pulled from drawers. The coffee stain on a receipt became a fingerprint of a day. The more sensory detail I collected, the less I felt alone in the months that followed. The spreadsheet grew. Columns multiplied. I labeled a tab "Recurring Obligations," and underneath I listed weekly transfers for groceries that financed someone else more than they fed me. Under loans, I put amounts with dates, and under unauthorized, I placed the signature that matched a form I never signed. I emailed the bank, I called the customer service line, and recorded the little pauses between sentences. I felt the air conditioner hum while the agent asked protocol questions, and I felt time stretch. I had to explain again what a transfer looked like and why a memo line mattered. My friend Tanya offered to be copied on emails because witnesses change how institutions react. Jenna, the accountant, taught me how to order a certified ledger and how to redline suspicious entries. Each conversation became an exchange of short, precise lines like a script. "Can you attach ID?" "Yes," I answered. "Can you notarize the affidavit?" Alex asked. "Yes," I said. "Do we need a forensic signature analysis?" Jenna asked. "Do it," I said. Those back and forths were small, but numbered, and they built the claim. There was a day when I nearly gave up because the past felt like quicksand. A tension arrived that made my chest tighten and my throat close. I remembered being a child and holding coins to buy sympathy. I remembered the late-night calls when my name felt like a bill collector. And I imagined years from now telling this story and wondering why I had waited. I thought of selling the documents to salvage nothing. Then I thought of shutting the folder and living the rest of my life paying without record. The memory of one winter morning when Linda had said, "Family helps family," played on loop. I decided that memory could no longer replace proof. I sat at the kitchen table, the light through the curtains cutting the dust in a thin plane, and I committed to sending the notice. That moment tightened into resolve. Alex drafted the notification, and we read it aloud together to catch every tone. "This is a formal demand for accounting and restitution," he said. "We will request freezing of accounts and an inventory of assets held with contributions from you under my client's name." "Will that hurt them?" I asked, the kitchen fan buzzing in the background. "It will make them face what their choices cost you and others," he said. My hands moved while my voice tried to stay calm. "Include the exact transfers," I told him. "Include the dates," he nodded, and typed as if the keys were a scalpel. We rehearsed possible responses. "They will deny," Alex said. "They will call you dramatic," Jenna warned. "They will cry," Marcus predicted. They may threaten to cut ties further, Miguel said by text. We will file the documents at the clerk's office and request an emergency freeze, Alex said. I want it stamped, certified, and sent by registered mail, I said. We read the final letter together. Tick the box for provisional measures, he said. Do it, I answered. The legal language was clinical, and it sounded like permission. When the notice went out, I felt a vertigo I had not expected. I clicked send on the registered email and then on a physical letter handed to a courier. My phone vibrated immediately. Linda called, and I let it go to voicemail so I could breathe. The voicemail was short. We need to talk, she said, voice close like someone trading in a soft currency. Claire texted a barrage of hearts and accusations. You want to embarrass us, she wrote. I replied with dates and attached the spreadsheet, as if that would make feelings tasteful. Several neighbors leaned into gossip. An old aunt asked if I was making waves. The public reaction became another kind of evidence in itself. People took sides in ways that had little to do with truth and much to do with loyalty. I posted nothing publicly at first. I let certain screenshots circulate among only those who offered to testify. I filed the paperwork at the small claims division and waited for the clerk to stamp my case number. The world kept smelling faintly of rain and burnt toast. There were nights when the phone would ring and a voice would ask, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I would say, "Yes," and hang up. That yes began to make a sound like my life moving. The first in-person confrontation arrived 2 weeks after the notice. Linda came to my apartment carrying a manila envelope and a look that tried to be both accusatory and small. The corridor smelled of bleach and new paint. She said, "I did not expect this." I said, "Do not hand me envelopes as apologies." She set the envelope down on my entry table. I did not open it immediately. Claire stood behind her with a posture that was all practiced gentleness and sharp control. I opened the envelope and pulled out a photocopy of a signed form and a check that did not cover the totals on my spreadsheet. "This is a gesture," Claire said. "It is not the full accounting," I said. Linda's voice wavered. "We are family," she said. "Family comes first," Claire said. "Family also accounts to each other," I answered. Miguel observed from the doorway. Samir kept his hands in his pockets. Marcus looked at me like someone waiting to offer a rescue line. The room was loud with small sounds, the rustle of paper, the tapping of a foot, the fridge humming. I read the photocopy aloud and pointed to a date and signature. "This signature does not match the one on the nurse form from 2017, I said calmly. "It is a copy," Claire said. "It was a mistake," Linda said. "Mistake after mistake adds up to a pattern," I said. "I handed this to the bank and to my lawyer," I continued. "I will sign a release when all debts are reconciled." There were more exchanges, at least 10 short bursts of accusation and response, and then Linda left, clutching a letter she had not read. The door closed and the hallway smelled briefly of her perfume, and anything could still be rearranged. One of the hardest tensions was realizing that the people who responded with outrage were sometimes the ones who had benefited most. That realization felt like ice in my chest. I remembered Natalie, an ex-colleague who offered a hug and then a comparison of my situation to something she read online. I remembered Alex in the office, leaning forward when I said I wanted accounts frozen. I remembered Jenna sighing and saying, "You did everything right." That sigh felt like a small bell tolling for me and not for them. I had to decide whether doing nothing would preserve a kind of fragile civility or whether taking action would burn bridges but build a life that did not cost me monthly payments. I chose the latter, and I kept choosing it on days when my phone lit up with guilt. There were procedural moments that felt almost banal and others that felt seismic. The clerk at the court stamped my file and wrote a case number with black ink. The bank representative, in her tight ponytail, asked for ID and proof of payment and then placed a temporary hold on accounts pending inquiry. The word freeze appeared like a cliff face in my notes. I had to explain to a judge in civil chambers how transfers labeled as gifts functionally constituted recurring obligations, and how a signature can appear on a form without consent. In plain language, the steps were simple. Collect certified bank statements, request a signature comparison from a forensic document examiner, file a demand for accounting, request provisional freezing of accounts if evidence suggests dissipation. That process means sending notarized affidavits, attaching copies of receipts, and requesting emergency measures from the court before assets are moved. It is a clinical sequence that sounds small and becomes large when you realize it can change who holds financial control. One of the moments when the process turned from paper to consequence was when a bank notified us that an account used to funnel payments would be temporarily frozen pending verification. There was a thud in my chest that was equal parts triumph and dread. I watched as Claire's feed filled with posts that tried to explain me away. I watched as Linda crafted messages that aimed to recalibrate sympathy. Public perception became a battlefield. My posts were factual and detached. I wrote small sentences about dates, about transfers, about receipts. I refused to weaponize shame. Alex advised restraint. Jenna advised documentation. Marcus advised self-care. I breathed through each notification like someone learning to meditate in a storm. The epilogue is long, and it has 3 specific checkpoints that I promised myself I would honor, telling where things stood at 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. At 1 month after the notice, the accounts labeled in my spreadsheet were under provisional hold. The court clerk confirmed receipt of our filings and scheduled a preliminary hearing. Linda sent a letter asking for mediation and offering a payment plan that matched neither the totals nor my emotional ledger. I accepted the mediation in theory because it allowed the court to monitor movement of funds, and because Alex insisted on documenting every concession. My phone still woke me, but the calls were now more measured. I found a small apartment with a front window, light that came without permission, and a cabinet where I could stack receipts. I slept better. The smell of old coffee faded. At 3 months, the hearing had been held. The forensic signature analyst confirmed irregularities. The judge ordered an interim accounting and warned both parties about transferring assets during litigation. An inheritance paperwork that I had believed to be settled showed contributions that matched years of my payments. The community around us divided in online threads and at family meals. Some people sided with me and offered testimony, including Marcus, Jenna, and Malik, a neighbor who had seen payments. Miguel provided texts confirming requests for help that matched my dates. The judge's provisional order meant that a house listed in my spreadsheet could not be sold without court approval. That legal protection felt like a small shelter in a storm. I began to think about long-term consequences not as revenge, but as rebalancing. I found a therapist and named for the first time the pattern that had taught me to feel guilt as an obligation. At 6 months, there was a partial settlement. The bank released a sum that matched a portion of what I had documented. An audit revealed that some transfers had been improperly represented as loans and others as gifts. Linda signed a mediated agreement to repay certain amounts over time and to hand over a notarized statement acknowledging my contributions. Claire and I still had conversations that were careful and awkward. Trust does not return overnight. The house that had felt like a refuge and a claim was listed in inventory, and an estate planner began to calculate fair restitution for transfers that effectively acted as inheritance shifts. I sold an asset in my name to clear lingering debts I had incurred trying to keep everyone afloat. The sale gave me space and literal money to move forward. I bought a small couch and a plant that I could kill slowly if I wanted to, but it felt like a beginning. My phone rarely lit up at 3 a.m. anymore. The long-term change was not purely legal, it was internal and practical. I learned to say no and to ask for receipts. I changed the word help to the word agreement and required written terms when a favor would cost me. I closed credit lines that had been kept open to maintain appearances. I fixed my budget to protect myself rather than other people. I met with Jenna quarterly to reconcile what remained of the ledger and to build a savings cushion. I rebuilt friendships with boundaries that kept me safe. The house of quiet pain I had lived in for years slowly emptied of its echoes. People who had supported me through small acts remained. People who wanted me to continue paying did not. My mother and sister and I have conversations now that can be tense and respectful. We took part in mediated sessions where we spoke through a counselor and where restitution was not a word meant to humiliate but to repair. If you are reading this and thinking about whether to start your own spreadsheet, start with one column date, one column amount, one column description, and one column proof. Save screenshots, request certified statements, and find an advisor who can translate what feels personal into language that institutions understand. This is not a call to hostility, it is a call to clarity. I am not the same person who opened that laptop at 11:23 p.m. I am more precise, and my heart has learned a new grammar that allows me to care without being consumed. If this story helped in any small way, consider subscribing for more episodes where I walk step by step through letters, how to request a court freeze, and how to organize a testimony package. Join a community that reads, comments, and supports because the work of reclaiming is easier when others hold a light with you. In the end, I reclaimed nights without phone calls, receipts that matched my memory, and money that returned to the families who were accountable for it. I did not set out to punish. I set out to make balance visible and to buy back the quiet I deserved. Silence now is not the exile it used to be. It is the peace I earned.